Hey guys, welcome back to another ADSR and Massive Synth tutorial. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, do that at youtube.com/ADSR tuts. So this is part 2 in a series that I started about the effects in the master section in Massive. And in part 1 we covered the dimension expander and the 2 reverbs, and today we're going to be going over the 2 different types of delay that Massive has to offer, the delay and the synced delay, or delay synced, but I just call it the sync delay. So jumping right into it, here's the sound. And I'm going to activate this delay on my FX1 slot, and the controls it gives you are dry, wet, damp, time left, and time right. The dry wet obviously controls the amount of dry signal in correlation to the wet signal and how much it's letting through to these next 3 knobs. And the damp is actually kind of an interesting control. It's a low pass filter that is basically affecting the cutoff of just the wet signal. So if you turn that all the way up and your dry wet's all the way down, it does nothing. So if I start to turn the dry wet all the way up and I keep the damp and the time left and the time right down, it turns down the volume and it acts like a filter. So if you want to use a really crazy amount of delay and have a lot of wet signal, using this damp control will help get back your sound to full volume and the cutoff that you had in your actual filters. So you can hear that's a pretty similar sound using that, and that's a really useful and really smart tool that they put on it, that it affects just the wet signal. So because a problem when you use any type of wet spatial effect like delay, dimension expander, reverb, you start to lose presence and clarity, and this damp control is a great way to get back a little bit of the presence to your sound. So this delay is just a simple stereo delay, and it doesn't have long delay times and long feedback. So it's more useful for basses and instruments that you just want to open up in the mix and you don't actually want to have a delay tail where you hit a key and you hear ta-ta-ta after it, or a ping-pong delay or anything like that. So I'll start playing some chords on the keyboard right here. And you can hear that it affects the sound through a filter. I mean, that almost sounds like a notch filter. So it definitely does some. So there's that slap back kind of sound. So you can get slap back delays with it pretty easily. So that's a common thing that guitarists will use. It'll help make the guitar sound bigger. So if you have a bass or you have some type of lead that just isn't sounding big enough, try using the simple delay and the dimension expander, and you should start to get a much bigger sound in your mix. So that's basically it for the delay. Let's move on to the synced delay. This is the more in-depth delay that Massive has to offer. So this delay gives you the following controls: dry, wet, damp, feedback, and then some little boxes with numbers in it that are your ratios for how the feedback's reacting in the sense of time. So if you have a ratio of 1 in 4, it's basically quarter notes, because everything's synced to your DAW's host with this. That's why it's called delay sync. So if I hit a note and I turn the feedback up and the dry wet up, let's turn it up all the way. So you hear that that's a quarter note at the tempo that I'm at. Just 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1 in 4 is a ratio that will give you a quarter note bounce feel. 1 in 8 is going to be eighth notes. 1 in 12 will give you kind of a cool swing feel. 1 in 16 will give you 16 notes. And 1 in 24 will give you 24th notes, and this is just the wet. So if you turn the wet down, And you can start, when you start playing around with the damp and the dry and wet, you can start to get some really interesting sound design kind of effects going on. You can kind of hear that shimmering effect going on at the end. If I just heard that, my ear would never be like, oh, delay is making that. So this delay in massive, you can do some pretty cool things, and it goes out to 32, which is really quick at any like EDM tempo. But if you're at a slower tempo like 90 or 100, that could be pretty useful. So you'll notice that there's 2 boxes on both the left and the right. So you can take like if you have, let me turn the dry wet up a little. So you can hear that I have the left set to 1 and 4. So in the left sound, the left side of the speaker, or your headphones, you have a quarter note feel, and then you have this whole note value going on, and so you can start to see that you can quickly dial in ping pong delays. And ping pong delays are delays that have kind of a different feedback setting for both the left and the right side of the audio spectrum, so then it kind of creates this like it's ping ponging back and forth between the two. So if you set your ratio just to 1 and 4 and 1 and 8, you can kind of hear it's bouncing back and forth because they have different times. So that becomes really useful for leads if you turn the feedback down, the damp down a little. And you'll notice that I turned the, you might notice that I turned the dry wet down. I found that these effects in massive work better with the dry wet down lower and then cranking up the other knobs, whether it's size, damp, feedback higher, as opposed to having the dry wet up higher and then having the feedback a little bit lower and the damp a little bit lower. Because it makes the effect a little bit too pronounced. So we can take this, if we make this left ratio now 2 and 4, you can start to see that you can actually really get into these ratio values and start to get some cool. So that one's going out really slow, out to the left. And again, the most useful, most probably commonly used one would be just having 1 and 4 on one of them and 1 and 8, so you have this ping pong delay. Or you could do 1 and 8 and then 1 and 16. But I would definitely say that 1 and 4 and 1 and 8 are probably some of the most commonly used ones. And one last thing I wanted to show you. When you use any of these spatial effects, whether it's the delay, the sync delay, the reverb, or dimension expander, you can start to lose some clarity and punch to your sound. So when I stop playing, you can hear all the reverb and the delay tails going, which sounds cool, and I like that. And that's a pretty usable effect. But to get back a little bit of the punch and clarity, what you can do is you can go to one of your envelopes, and this is kind of like what the shape would look like if it was just a standard envelope. If you take your decay down and your level down, then take the crosshairs and modulate that under the pitch in one of your oscillators, and then take that and jack it up or down. So if you have a bass, I would turn it down. If you have a lead sound, I'd make sure it's above 0. And you can start to get some percussive elements back to your sound by turning the decay up just a little bit. So if I go out too far, it makes like this weird laser sound. But just a little bit, and I start to get that little snap and attack, that snap to the attack back that you're kind of losing when you start to use a lot of these spatial effects. So here, I'll turn this off, and then I'll turn it on. You can hear the difference. And again, that's great when you have something like, I'm thinking more in the context of a mix. If I have kicks and snares there and things like that, it's going to start to get lost with all the reverb, but I like having those spatial effects because it helps open up the sound. So that's basically it for the delays in Massive. In the next tutorial, I will be going over these flangers, both the positive and positive mono, negative and negative mono, and probably hit some of the choruses too. So if you have any questions or comments, let me know below, and I'll try to get back to them as soon as I can. And if you haven't already checked out massivesynth.com, head on over there to see all of the other tutorials that we're pumping out. And yeah, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.